Welcome back. In our last session, we set up the project and wrote our very first TDD test for a simple ping endpoint. Today, we'll move into something more realistic, implementing a login system using test-driven development. We'll start by writing a failing test for a login endpoint. Then we'll write just enough code to make it pass. Let's get started. Create the test file inside our test source set. I have named this one login route test. Let's add 4 constants. One for the endpoint, the second one that will represent a valid username during the test, the third one will represent a valid password during the text, and lastly there will be some invalid text which I'll leave to be a blank string. Next, let's create a helper data class that we will use to pass in our login request. We will add a method for performing the login request. Here we will write 2 tests. The first one expects a 200, which is okay when valid credentials are provided. The second one expects a 401 unauthorized when the password is incorrect. You'll notice that the route doesn't exist yet, so the tests should fail. As a matter of fact, we have 2 dependencies we need to install: content negotiation and the Ktor client for our tests to work correctly. We'll also need serialization for this to happen. Let's head over to Gradle within our server module to add the dependencies. Before we implement our route, we need to enable JSON support in our server. Let's add the necessary dependencies to our Gradle file. Let's start by adding the Kotlin X serialization plugin, after which we will also add the Kotlin X serialization JSON library, server content negotiation, and client content negotiation. Here are their respective library definitions: serialization, content negotiation from server, content negotiation on the client side. Let us resync our project and have everything set up. With this, Ktor can automatically pass JSON requests and serialize JSON responses. Now, let's install it in our server. We've installed the content negotiation plugin and enabled JSON support. This means our routes can now receive and respond with JSON seamlessly. Let us create a new file that will hold all our application routes. I will create a function to hold our authentication routes. In this case, it will be an extension function to the class called route. Let us then refactor the login request data class and move it from the test source set to the main source set. Import content negotiation. This time we want to import the client plugin for our tests so that we can make the test run. Since our test now has all its dependencies, let's try running them. As expected, both of them will fail. This is because we are yet to add our endpoint. Let's start by marking the login request with @serializable, such that we are able to convert JSON into Kotlin data classes using our serialization plugin. One thing we need to update in our test is we will need our endpoint to extend from the auth endpoint. With this, you can run the test again. We expect it to fail. Let's finish our implementation. We've added some basic login functionality where we just check for the request that we have been given, is the username user and is the password password. If that's true, respond with OK. If false, respond with unauthorized. Finally, let's call our function inside our application file within the routing segment. Now, all we need to do is rerun our test. As expected, they now both pass. With all that set, it's time for the refactor stage. To begin with, let's create a services package inside our main source set. Let's add an auth service. Here, we will add a validate function that will return a boolean. We will then check if the username is user and password is password. After which, we will update our login route. We refactor the route to use the service. Firstly, create an instance of the service, after which we will change up our direct logic, which is in our if statement, and replace it with our validate method from auth service. We've now moved the credential validation into an authentication service. This keeps the route clean and makes our code easier to test in isolation later on. You can now rerun your test and check whether they still run correctly. As expected, everything is all green. Let us add one more test. Validation for missing fields. Here, we will just attempt to perform the login request using an invalid text for both username and password. Let's go over to the green and update this within our route, since if we run, we expect this to fail. Here, we simply check, is the username blank or is the password blank? If either is correct, then respond with a bad request. Now, if we rerun our previous test, we expect it to pass. There we go. That's it for today's lesson. We've successfully applied TDD to implement a login endpoint with authentication and input validation. In our next episode, we'll now move over to the client side, where we'll apply TDD to the login view model and hook it up to this endpoint. Don't forget to commit your changes or pull the lesson 2 branch if you're following along from the lesson repo. See you in the next one.